Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about a tale of two ceasefires, with regrets to Charles Dickens, and two wars that are still going on. Our guest for the show is Roopmati Khandekar, our geopolitical analyst. Welcome to the show, Roopmati.
Hello, Ajay. Thank you for having me on your show, and always my pleasure to be here with you.
Trump said he was going to end the wars in Europe and the Middle East on day one, but he has not done so. How have these wars evolved since the day one? What has he done? What has he tried to do? What are the prospects of reaching peace now? So, Roopmati, we know that the violence is continuing in Ukraine, that Russia is continuing to attack Ukraine. Ukraine is continuing to defend itself as it can, and we should talk about its ability in a little while. But what has Trump actually done, to bring peace to Ukraine?
Jay, 5 weeks since Trump has spoken about the Ukraine deal, and Trump suspended U.S. Policy of direct and started dealing directly with Russia, bypassing both Ukraine and Europe as a whole. And then you have the notorious Oval Office evisceration of Zelensky completely. And, the U.S. halting the weapons supply along with the cessation of intelligence cooperation. So that hit Ukraine really hard. It panicked, and it had to come down to Trump's words. So the Trump administration started showing more concessions to Russia. And you had Witkoff, who was a New York real estate developer, and now, Jay, he was an omnipresent diplomat in all of the ceasefires. And he defended Russia's drone strikes when the ceasefire was brought in, that they came into effect before the pause. And the foundational assumptions of Trump's ceasefire in Ukraine, Jay, are that Ukraine has started the war, and Zelensky is a dictator who has got no popular support. So it's kind of an uneven foundation on which the ceasefire exists. And right now, Jay, we have the Black Sea ceasefire in place, and it is to allow the shipment of grains from Ukraine and Russia. And it replaces what? It replaces the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which was brokered by Turkey and the UN. You remember when Ukraine was starting, and Russia exited in 2023. So it's a very precarious situation there, because when you hear the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, saying that a ceasefire in Ukraine would follow these steps: that first there would be an aerial ceasefire, then there would be a maritime ceasefire, then you would have the maritime ceasefire would allow the movement of goods and the grains, and then you would have the line of control, the actual front lines, the details of the verification mechanisms, the freezing of the lines to wherever they are, and then the border, and then the peace. So there's a long stage that we have to go through in the Ukraine ceasefire. Trump said it would happen instantly. It's not. It's really got a set of grueling mechanisms to go through.
I suspect that Putin has Trump's number. He knows how to undo him. He's much better at this kind of close proximity strategy, and he's making a fool out of Trump. He knows that Trump has committed to do this, and he's undermining it. Trump at one point a week ago said that Putin was, quote, dragging his heels, end quote. That doesn't help, and I believe it. Trump makes the statement, but Putin, in fact, is dragging his heels. How is he dragging his heels? We know he's still lobbing missiles and drones into Ukraine. He's killing people, destroying their infrastructure. We know he's still doing that. What kind of a ceasefire is that? He's not even hesitating. He's just making war. He wants to get advantage so he can argue for more territory, I suppose, more concessions from Zelensky. And then on the other side, there's that awful meeting in the Oval Office. Have we recovered from that? Is Trump treating Zelensky any better these days?
I don't think so. It was really an evisceration, because Zelensky lost his diplomatic swagger swag after that. He was, he is just lost. He's like he doesn't know exactly what to do. It was like before he was motivated. He had direction to go for. He was saying he would win the war. He would defeat Russia. Now you have the entire Europe into helter skelter. You have Sweden building bunkers for 7 million citizens preparing for World War III. So the kind of panic that happens in Sweden is far less than what is happening in Ukraine now. They're in absolute panic because they have lost US support. Trump has completely washed his hands of them. There is just a trickle of superficial support. But Ukraine knows now it's going to start a losing battle against Russia. And Putin is always aggressive. He's never going to let go of Jay attacking, and he's never going to be on the defensive. So Zelensky never recovered from that meeting, and he went into, like you said last time, his one mistake led to another. He just made follies after follies.
Well, he sort of bent the knee there right afterward, trying to agree with Trump about the rare earth agreement. But that hasn't happened either. As a matter of fact, last thing I saw about that was that Trump's position on the rare earth agreement had become more aggressive. He wants more. So we're further away from the rare earth agreement now, and there's no way that Zelensky can, reach agreement about that agreement. So it seems to me that the two countries, that is the U.S. and Ukraine, are further apart on that possibility, and that is a kind of a portal, a threshold to the larger discussion about making peace. After all, Trump is transactional. He says he wants the rare earth. Okay, so after the regrettable meeting in the Oval Office, Zelensky immediately goes to Europe, and he says, "Will you guys help me?" What happens? What's the rhetoric from Europe, the EU, the NATO members in Europe, and what is the actual steps they've taken?
When he went to Europe, he wanted to gather them together, and he also stated in the Oval Office that Europe was an equal partner in helping Ukraine as much as the US. He was portraying a big mistake on his part, because the US helps Ukraine far more than Europe does. Europe does whatever help it does with a guarantee. US has given all this money without any guarantee. That is the only difference that we had. And when the US demanded that you need this rare earths, um, like you said last time, he said because the draft that he got has completely changed, he does not agree to anything of the rare earths agreement as of now. So, Jay, he is talking of the US money without guarantee continuing. And that is not going to happen, because you have a businessman at the Oval Office right now. He's going to say, "What can you give me if I give you this?" It's never going to be like, "Let me help you for national pride, for sovereignty, for democracy." That is all out in the back doors, Jay. Now it's just going to be, "What can you give me? What can be of help to me?" If Putin is a better partner, then that way. And Zelensky started manipulating, or you say, uh, try what is that? He started struggling to get European support. He wants foot soldiers on the ground in Ukraine. He wants something close to the NATO, which is European centric, to form. And if America is not helping, let's have unity within the European powers to help him. And Jay, we know that Europe could not unite themselves. It's a harsh truth. Europe could not unite itself on monetary terms. Military terms is going to be far more difficult than that. It requires a lot of coordination, a lot of give and take, and that is difficult in Europe because they have a lot of diverse goals and objectives. Jay. Italy doesn't want to have foot soldiers. France is very keen to have foot soldiers. Germany is having a good business transaction with Russia. Ukraine wants tariffs and isolation of Russia on the same level that was happening in Biden's um, term, Jay, and that he has to forego now. He has to look for new developments and a new set of aims and ambitions. He cannot still live in that fantasy land. It's over. That is the past, and he has to move on And now, Jay, there will be new uh, alliances and everything, but American support to Ukraine cannot be underestimated by Zelensky. That is where he makes the biggest mistake of his career. And to undermine or equate American support with Europe, entire United Europe, is another mistake that he is making. And America is the one who provides a security blanket to entire Europe, Jay. It's a transatlantic um, what do you say, a guarantee. So when Ukraine goes and asks for security guarantees, they should they should have gone with a little bit of more softness. And you can't threaten that you give me American support or I will go for European support. It is not a match.
No, it isn't. And what's interesting is that Biden has kind of, spoiled the situation because he has given Ukraine weapons that are American weapons. And mind you, we spend $900 billion a year or more on the military. We're finding that out now and examining what Hegseth is doing and not doing. And that's cumulative. What I mean is, build it and build it and build it. You never actually, use it. Sorry, you just build it. And the result is that we've given these weapons to Ukraine, but they became dependent on those weapons, like for ammunition, for the systems, for the software and all that. And if you stop all of a sudden, this is what Trump has done. If you stop all of a sudden, you don't share intelligence, all of that. And I think that probably Elon Musk has turned them off Starlink too. They have to find other ways to achieve internet and GPS functionality. They're really stuck because they're used to, they're habituated to American weapons and American systems. So this is really bad. Europe cannot do that. Europe has different systems, different weapons, different ammunition. They don't make American systems and ammunition. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is that Europe can't make agreements. You certainly are correct, absolutely right about that. Europe just has trouble making agreements. They have trouble making agreements in the EU for business and market affairs, but they also have trouble making agreements for NATO. NATO is in shambles. NATO is in chaos now. Trump has, alienated Canada. Where is Canada? Canada is a member of NATO. Is Trump a member of NATO? The U.S. a member of NATO? It doesn't look like it. And I think a lot of those European countries are rightfully concluding that there is no NATO. There is no Article 5. And if there was an attack on one of them, well, the others would not come to the rescue. Sorry about that. We know the US wouldn't come to the rescue. We know the UN can't do anything, won't do anything. And we know that a lot of those guys are on their own, like Estonia. This is, it's almost pathetic. Estonia is building a defensive system now. It's a little late for that. And they don't have the economy to support much of a system. And likewise with Finland and Sweden. So I think, where we are is that Putin can have what he wants. He can have Eastern Europe. He can have Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and for that matter, the Scandinavian countries. So it's hard to say that there's any defense in place that will save Ukraine. You agree?
So true, Jay. So true about this. And Jay, Ukraine, like we discussed last time, it's on the great European plane. So to have Ukraine is a strategic vantage point that they have. So if Russia was to have NATO right at Ukraine and at the doorstep of Russia, they could have had the foothold strength for European armies to march onwards into Russia. So for them to maintain NATO away from Ukraine is the main target if you talk about wartime strategies, Jay. So that's why for Russia, it's a priority that Ukraine does not join NATO and NATO does not come across the European plane onto Russia. So for that, Ukraine has so much of importance, Jay, and that is the point which has led to all this dispute and disagreement, Jay. But right now, Europe talks of an iron dome of increasing 1.8% of their GDP into security. all these are things which will happen gradually. They can't have an iron dome mechanism, Jay. None of them are ready to pay budgets to the NATO. None of them come up with payments regularly to NATO. So the US runs, US finances, US supplies NATO. And if you underestimate the US contribution to NATO, it's Zelensky's topmost mistake today to bring in Europe and form an alternative to Europe with a Ukraine-centric infrastructure. Jay. That's what he's trying to do. A military alliance. That's what he talks about.
So can we hope for a breakdown between Trump and Putin, where Trump alienates Putin or vice versa? Can we hope that that the U.S. will not be so, in fact, through Trump, will not be so infatuated with Russia anymore, and that will have an effect on this? I mean, after all, after the Signal chat scandal a few days ago, one of the things that Trump did, and I told you it's my conclusion that was only for distraction. It was not a true statement. So much of what Trump does is not a true statement. In fact, maybe all of what he does is not a true statement. He said, oh, he's very, very ticked off at Putin for suggesting that Zelensky was not capable of leading Ukraine and he should be replaced, or words to that effect. And he made a big statement about that. But he made that statement right after the scandal in order to distract the press from the scandal. He made other statements too to distract the press from the scandal. Is it a real argument, or is it just Trump? And does it have, in any event, does it have any effect on what we've been discussing?
Jay, Trump has got a history with Putin. And that is what is one of the factors which influences dealing with Zelensky. He comes with antagonism towards Zelensky. He is not very friendly towards Zelensky. First thing he does is he breaks the isolation of Russia from the system. And whether right now, to get Russia back into the SWIFT financial system, you require the approval of Europe. They are not ready to give it. What happens? They're still bypassing. America does not want to fall back in this new business dealing that is happening between Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, all these people, the Middle Eastern countries, they have formed their own system of transactions, bypassing the SWIFT financial system. And crude oil from Russia goes to India, gets refined, sold to the European market. So all this is going on. Why should America be the only one to isolate Russia? In fact, it's happening the other way around. America is getting isolated when all these business transactions are happening. Europe has not stopped any of its transactions with Russia. The oil supply, the gas supply, the grain supply, everything is on. Now, what America missed out, and what was the most threatening consequence of this Ukraine-Russia war was the de-dollarization of currency. People wanted to get rid of the petrodollar. That would have had a devastating effect on the American economy. We couldn't afford that. It would have set so many parameters helter-skelter. You needed to get into the groove with this geopolitical system. And that's what exactly happened. After, nobody's isolating Russia. Sanctions are just put by America. America is out of this. So by directly dealing with Russia right now, irrespective of the SWIFT financial system, the de-dollarization schemes of the BRICS, which is right now the strongest alliance in the geopolitical system, you have put that on a hold. That was of urgent importance right now. And secondly, Jay, America comes into this entire dealing. Now, Saudi Arabia being a mediator in all these conflicts, you have a good friend in the Middle East who will follow the Abraham Accords, who will follow your instructions, who will be your business partner, who will invest in the US. So all this is happening with a strategic value to it, Jay. So as much of a megalomaniac that Trump is, also his strategies are working in a different way for American interests.
Let me go to the American public opinion. I find it extraordinary that when Trump makes these ridiculous statements, half the country believes them. And he has made inroads on absurdities, repeated absurdities, and it's like what got him elected in the first place. People believing statements that were lies, that were unhinged. And so I ask you, where the American public opinion is now. Are they supporting Ukraine or not? He is obviously tearing himself away from Ukraine. He's not helping Ukraine in any way. He's hurting Ukraine in every way, and he's making that clear to his base and to a lot of people in the U.S., perhaps an increasing number of people in the U.S. who buy into his craziness. And so, how are we doing? Would you say that the United States supports Ukraine or not?
Jay, public opinion we know is very fickle, and it depends on the headlines that happens and the funding that comes for public opinion. So the more that they gather, the more you have this fervor in public opinion. You don't have these actual people who will analyze what is actually happening in the international system or anything. For there are conversations which are happening, and in each conversation, what happens, Jay? We see on the television screen Trump flashing everything in the name of America. So whatever is happening is in the name of America. There's a lot of advertisement skill to this, his marketing skill to this. Whatever happens, he's Zelensky is thrown out of the Oval Office. What has happened? It's for America. So that is coming across very strongly. I don't know what strategy they're using it, but literally everything that is happening is marketed as a flaw of the previous government and as a improvement by the current government. So whatever peace that they're striving for, because though the peace agreements have led to more panic and more confusion in the entire system, Europe is building bunkers and going underground. Russia has become all the more powerful. All this is just kept on the sidelines, and it is just America who wants peace. The it's a very different kind of strategy, Jay, and it's very new to see that we have this business acumen coming to such a fore that you have Trump being portrayed. I mean, just you have to have a halo around his head right now. It's like that. That's the portrayal of Trump right now.
If Ukraine fails, and there's a significant chance that it will simply fail in view of all these factors we've been observing. And if it fails, the liberal world order somehow fails also. But let's go to the Middle East. The Middle East is a hotbed. Somewhere along the line after the inauguration, Netanyahu decided that he had to be more aggressive with the Hamas and Gaza, and he is attacking them on a daily basis. And the old issues about killing Palestinians in the process arise, and the United Nations doesn't condemns that, and the world itself is concerned that Netanyahu is back to his old violence. Now you can say that's based on the fact that that Hamas has not released the hostages and has been difficult to deal with in the peace negotiations. But we're back to the same level or even increased level of violence, and the same thing in Hezbollah in Lebanon. And although I like to think that Syria will be better off, there's a strange relationship between Hezbollah and Lebanon and the Syrian government, the new one. It's not clear that that's going to settle down or not. And then, of course, you have Iran, which is still providing weapons, which is still fomenting unrest all around. And look at the Yemenis, look at the Houthis. I guess the United States felt, Trump felt, the intelligence community in the U.S. felt, such as it is, that it was necessary to attack the Houthis in Yemen, and they're still doing it. And the Yemenis, the Houthis are attacking the ships out there, the Harry Truman ship and others. So I'm not confident that this is going anywhere good in the Middle East. he said he was going to solve that problem on day one also. And I think the whole thing is flaring up. And then recently, and I suggest this could be a distraction too, he said he was going to bomb Iran. And
Mm.
if they didn't come to the table about a nuclear agreement within a very short period of time, I forget how much, he was going to bomb them. Oh, okay. So how about a little more violence? So we have we have violence all over the Middle East, and if Trump is trying to resolve these conflicts, I don't see that he's doing much about it. He's more like moving toward violence, and it's personal, and it's for the Christian nationalists in this country, and it's his relationship with Netanyahu. All things considered, though, it's interesting that you compare this to Ukraine. Ukraine, we have continuing violence, possibly from Putin, increased violence. And in the Middle East, you have not only violence, but you have violence in more theaters, more increased violence, more involvement by the US in that violence, and more rhetoric suggesting additional violence. It actually looks much worse in the Middle East. Your thoughts about all of that, Roopmati?
So, right, Jay, your analysis is really point on. So, in Gaza, the Gaza ceasefire, the second the ceasefire in our tail, Jay. So, Trump started in January to secure a ceasefire over here, and the same envoy Steve Witkoff going for this ceasefire too. So, it was 3 phases that we discussed in our previous program, Jay, and they were intended to last 6 weeks. 33 Israeli prisoners for 1,800 Palestinian prisoners. 33 Israeli hostages. And Israel was unwilling for any permanent settlement in Gaza. They did not want another space for Hamas again, or to allow the Palestine Authority to take control of Gaza again. You have Hamas, which is unwilling to disarm. You still have civilians who protect Hamas. They are unlikely to give up the remaining hostages, which is technically, Jay, the only bargaining weapon in this entire conflict. Jay. Just for the hostages, we stop and we, try to negotiate the ceasefire. And then we have Trump suggesting the ownership of Gaza for the Riviera. Jay. That is always on the cards and one of the goals. So, and restarting the war, Jay, recently has made Netanyahu reconstitute his right-wing government and avoid early election for himself. So, Jay, now we have such a tactic in the Middle East that has led to more violence because there were fronts happening in Israel. The Houthis, the Iran-sponsored Hezbollah, Hamas, all these people. So now when the US is fighting the Houthis and threatening in Iran, there is, like you rightly said, a flare-up of violence and a potential for more violence. And Syria being a failed state right now and in the hands of an ISIS recruit, you have another point which is going to be very conflicting point in this ceasefire, Jay. So you have all these elements still present in this ceasefire, and this ceasefire is also very superficial, like Ukraine. As soon as the ceasefire announced, you have violence happening underground. You have violence happening a few hours later, and nobody can do anything about it because you don't know exactly who to blame. And when the parties come to the table with so much of effort, and some violence triggers it, or some hostage is killed, or some hostage is not returned, or there's frustration, there is no cessation of violent activities. And Jay, civilians, the outcry for civilians, it has been made very clear from October 7th, the terrorist attack, that there would be no differentiation between civilians and combatants if they were in the line of the conflict. So civilians were given a chance to go and take safe haven, and those who remained, Jay, they remained at their own risk. So this ceasefire becomes complicated for that reason, Jay, because we have civilians here who protect a terrorist organization, Jay.
This morning I got an email from the Times of Israel, which I consider a very credible paper. and they said that there were a lot of families in Israel that were victims of the loss of their loved ones in the IDF who have been killed or wounded. They said the economy in Israel was declining. No surprise that they've been at war for 500 days. And I said to myself, gee, this, and they were asking for contributions for Passover so that people could eat food baskets for Passover. Say to myself, gee, this is not a good thing. This is something you might have expected. People hungry in Israel, people whose businesses, whose employment has been lost, people whose family has been decimated. And I don't think we realize that. We see Israel as all powerful. It's not all powerful. Furthermore, there's been some reports in the media about protests on both sides of the issue, pro Netanyahu, anti Netanyahu, all around the hostages, and all springing out of the October 7th attack. And you say to yourself, and the press has said this is like a civil war. And I say, gee, well, wherever Trump goes, it's chaos. And I don't know exactly, how to connect what's happening on the streets of Tel Aviv with Trump's emergence as a protector of Israel. But I think there's a connection there somewhere. I mean, he sheds chaos wherever he goes, and now Israel itself is in chaos and arguably headed toward, a civil war between the factions, civilized factions in Israel who have very different opinions. So he is providing weapons, though, and arguably he's providing, offshore military presence by the ships. But I think in terms of bringing it to a peace, he's not doing that. One of the things you mentioned, which I'd like to spend a little more time with you on, is the Riviera. The Riviera is sort of like his thing walking through the halls of the newly organized Kennedy Center, where he's with a reporter, and out of the blue, he says, I am going to release the 60,000 pages of the assassination of John F. Kennedy to you tomorrow, which was, an unhinged statement. And he does that. He has his staff working all night, and in the morning they release 60,000 pages, which includes hundreds of intelligence agents who have now been outed. Not great. And that's in sort of the unhinged, spur of the moment kind of decision he makes out of nowhere, just to be in the headlines. And he got into the headlines, first in a good way, I suppose, and then in a bad way when the press realized that he had outed all these people. So this thing about the Riviera was the same kind of spur of the moment decision, in my opinion. And he came up with that out of nowhere. All of a sudden, he had this, what he considered a brilliant idea. He knew it would get on the front page. It got on the front page. But then he couldn't execute even the smallest part of that. No country in the Middle East would accept 2 million refugees from the Palestinians in Gaza. No country.
Yes.
And so that was dead on arrival. The whole idea was dead on arrival. I think, as you suggest, I think what he had in mind is the US would take over the Gaza Strip and would build hotels, and Trump, would have hotels there, and some of his oligarch friends would have hotels there. But that isn't going anywhere. And if you say to me, well, Jay, that's a way to reach peace, because that's what he was saying when he mentioned that, cockamamie idea. That's the kind of thing where it doesn't go anywhere. It alienates countries and cultures in every direction. And in fact, it doesn't help. It hurts. It exacerbates things. It creates more chaos yet. Your thoughts about all of that?
True, Jay. Your analysis about him having these divergent tactics to get away from the main point has been so precise and accurate on all the points, Jay. But these people, media plays to him. and his talk, and they lap it up because he gives these sensational, scandalous headlines every time that he opens his mouth. And Jay, one thing is for sure, that Gaza is never going to be the same again for Palestinians like it was before. That is the truth that they'll have to accept, because the way they were given the keys to Gaza to thrive and develop, that will never be given again, because that was a mistake for Israel, and Israel had to pay a heavy price on October 7th. And leave alone October 7th, Jay, there was always these niggling attacks. Why 1,800 prisoners for 33 Israeli hostages? Who were those 1,800 prisoners? They were people who would come and uh, try to ram a car into the security gate, or try to bomb a busy place, or try to stab a civilian on the streets of Israel. So Israel has always been living with a rogue neighbor right at the doorstep, or right across the fence. And Gaza will never be the same again. And till that point that the Palestinians accept it. Now, where do these 2 million Palestinians go? You have this triple layered wall on Egypt borders, which do not allow any Palestinian to cross across. If they deserve so much of your sympathy and your brotherhood, or you have so much, why don't you take them inside? What is the criminal record that you feel that they have, that you should not allow them to trespass into your land? The same way Israel tries to protect its civilians. So that Israel, they say, does not have a right to do so. Israel should allow the Palestinians to live, to come across, and to, you know, Israel is not giving Palestinians the right to live, but the Palestinians in Gaza always called it the biggest open air prison ever. So they never gave it value as a homeland, or they never gave it value as a habitat. They always demeaned it, and their focus was always across the border towards Israel as your enemy number one. So you have those boiled up, uh, what do you say, those sentiments inside them waiting to explode. So you could not have a terrorist camp for training suicide bombers, constantly thinking of eliminating Israel off the map. So, Jay, that will be something which the entire geopolitical system will have to accept, that as soon as Syria failed, Israel moved fast, because now Israel has to anticipate and act. It cannot wait for something to happen, and then what is the effect that the October 7th had? Israel had to give an explanation for why it was attacking, for why it was defending. In fact, missiles sent from the bunkers was all put behind the scene, Jay. It was just Israel attacking Palestine. It was never Israel defending itself against Palestine. So never another mistake again, Jay.
Never again, indeed. Well, I want to ask you the same question I asked you about Ukraine. That is the attitude of the American about America. Well, what do they think about this? And I guess the sub question is that he's been going after students in various schools and stripping them of their immigrant status, even their permanent resident status, and deporting them, or attempting to, and getting into all kinds of contentions about students who, it's hard to hate them. It's hard to, they may be anti-Semitic, but we have a lot of kids on college campuses who've been caught up in that, and he's going after them. And the press never misses any of those heart-rending stories about how these PhD candidates are being, detained in the street and, transferred to other places in the country or worse. There was one that is likely to be returned to Russia. How about that? Where she has spoken against Putin, and I don't think she's going to have a good time if she's deported to Russia. So my question to you is he helping Israel in terms of going after these Palestinian supporters and protesters on the college campuses? And what is the American public opinion about what is happening in the Middle East right now?
A lot of funding for these university protests against Israel, pro-Palestine, was funded by George Soros, himself a Jew. But he dreams. He's a villain who dreams of dictating world politics, and all this unless the students had funds to protest on the campuses, and they did this exactly October 8th, 9th. They did not know what happened, who did it, why did it happen. They just took protesting, and it was always pro-Palestine against Israel. Now, by uh, going after these protesters and by these universities, he stopped the funding for campuses who allowed this. Even he went to that extent. He's cancelled the loans, student loans, that these students who are violating or supporting Palestine got. And Jay, he goes after them, and visibly it looks like he is supporting Israel and against these protesters who are in large numbers. And that appeals to a lot of those you know those feelings of which everybody was getting frustrated, that why are they supporting Palestine without knowing the facts. And when he does this canceling, he's doing a lot of canceling of other HB1 visas also, and other students also who he feels protested against him during the MAGA wars, or who are pro-democratic. He's just put them under the carpet. It's a wholesale effort that he's taken, and he is targeting who he feels violates his line of thinking. Jay.
Well, we have found a lot of things that he's done and some that he's not done. But the bottom line is these conflicts are serious conflicts. They affect the world order in Ukraine and in the Middle East. Can you think of anything that he's done that is actually consistent with his platform of bringing peace to either of those theaters? Is there anything he's done?
Just Steve Witkoff is the one who's roaming around all these places alone and trying to get ceasefires out of these areas of conflict, and mapping of these routes, and the hope that he gives in the utopia that he's promised to all of us is what is consistent in in his entire talk. So you feel, yeah, he will do it. He will do it. So we all wait, and the tale goes on.
Yeah, the tale goes on. So I would like to ask you my standard question is, what would you do as the Secretary of State? And I'm afraid that the only way to look at this is to conflate the conflicts. That is, they're related. They're related from American foreign policy, American public opinion in this country. Do you have any really brilliant ideas on how to bring peace to both places?
uh, two envoys, Jay. We need two envoys who will have two different schools of thought, because the same person is roaming around. You're having the same kind of confusion in both the conflicts. Uh, the ceasefires in both these places, Jay, do not have force of implementation. It is just guidelines which are given, and they are following the UN model of working. They are just giving guidelines. Nobody's seeing how it's implementing. Uh, the ceasefire is discussed after long hours in Riyadh, 8 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours, and immediately you have bombings and drones and everything happening. So then you have these diplomatic babblings that are happening, which literally nobody's paying attention to, Jay. And this is what is, a diplomat would say things without uh, actually getting into the box of that you said this, and it would be his way of explaining things. Right now there is mumbling going on in diplomatic corridors, Jay, and nobody knows what is going to happen next, because Trump's guideline is peace, but how to get there is the problem. And just by issuing these ceasefires, we are not reaching anywhere, because all the parties are doing exactly what they want.
How wise. Babbling, I think, is the word you used. Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Roopmati Khandekar, a geopolitical analyst. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Global Connections. We've been talking about A Tale of Two Ceasefires, with apologies to Charles Dickens. Thank you so much to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.
Hello, Ajay. Thank you so much.